Thanks for checking out this video. For a full list of materials used in this project, head down to the description below and click on Show More. We're going to need a few things to get started here on our earrings. You're going to start with a base piece of felt, and this is a stiff felt that I've actually had cut to the size that I need for the piece that I'm making. And I actually have this piece cut specifically for the design. If you're getting the kit or if you get the kit subscription in April of 2024, you'll get a little piece just like this as well. So you won't have to cut that felt by yourself. But otherwise, if you get just a piece of felt that you need to cut down, you're going to cut it to about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, a square, and that'll give you plenty of room to work. You're also going to need your cabochon, which will sit in the center here, and then a couple of leaf beads and a variety of seed beads in 11 colors that you want to complement your design, as well as colors that you'll use for the fringe here. And then I've also got an 8 going around the edge. You'll need a back piece, and this backing for embroidery will cover all the stitches that we make, so you won't see any of your stitches on the back of the felt. And then we're also going to use an earring, whatever kind of earring you want. I have a post earring here, but you can also attach a fish hook at the top. So go ahead and get all your materials gathered, and we'll get started. Okay, I am ready to get started here. I think I forgot to mention previously that you are going to need a thread and a needle. I'm using a size 10 needle and a 0.006 or a size 6 thread. This is, or the needle is a size 10 because I want it to be a little bit on the thicker side, only because your needle is going to be going through the felt, and then eventually this backing that will go on the back of the felt. So I want a needle that's going to be thick enough to stand going through there and not something too flimsy like a size 12. I also have here some glue, and I've grabbed one of these little files. There's actually a handy pack of 4 files, and this one is out of this pack. I'm going to use the file here to file the back of my glass cabochon a little bit. Because I'm going to glue the cabochon down on the felt, I want the glue to adhere very well to the cabochon. A lot of times with the glass, it has such a smooth surface that the glue doesn't really grip onto it and hold very well. So if you file it a little bit and just rough up that surface, the glue will adhere better. So I'm going to start here with just a little dab of glue on the back of my cabochon, and you don't need much. And then I'm going to take this cabochon and I'm going to center it in this top portion here of my pre-cut felt. Now, if you're not getting the kit, or if you're not getting the kit subscription, you'll just have a square piece of felt, and so you can just align this cabochon so it's towards the top of your square. And I'm going to just press that down and make sure it's where I want it. Make sure that the this empty space, the felt that is beyond the cabochon here, is all about equal the whole way around, except for, of course, the bottom here, where you have these other 2 shapes. Oops. And then you're going to let this dry for a minute so that your glue adheres well. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and start working on adding some seed beads around my cabochon. Once your cabochon, once the glue on your cabochon is dry enough that you can handle this, we're going to start by first adding a row of seed beads directly next to our cabochon. So I'm going to take my needle and thread and just come up through the felt from the bottom, so that my needle and thread are coming out right next to my cabochon. I don't need to leave any space there between my thread and the cabochon. It can come up right at the edge there. And you're going to leave a little bit of a tail thread here at the end, or on the back side of your thread, or back side of your felt. You don't need to leave much because you're not going to end up tying this off. It's just going to hang out at the back here so that your thread doesn't come all the way through. Pick up a few seed beads. I'm going to do 5 seed beads. Now you can do anywhere between 4 to 6 seed beads. It's going to be up to you what you're comfortable with, but I'm going to do 5. And I'm going to let these seed beads fall all the way down. And notice I'm also holding my thread here at the bottom, or on the underneath side, with my finger here, so that as I work with it, I don't accidentally pull my thread all the way through the felt. So I'm holding this. Oops, my cabochon moved a little bit. Put that back into place. So I'm going to take my thread and my beads here and just let these beads fall all the way down to the felt, and then pull them around the cabochon so they fit snugly. Then I'm going to take my needle and just go straight down through the felt at the very end of my beads. And pull that thread all the way through, making sure that if you were like me and you did not let your cabochon dry all the way, that you're not pushing it out of place as you do this. You're then going to take your needle and thread and go through the same hole or puncture mark. Oops, see? Setting a bad example here with my cabochon. You're going to then set your needle, or send your needle and thread through the felt, through that same puncture mark that you made when you started, and go through these 5 seed beads again. I would recommend using a white thread. I'm using a green only so that it's easier for you to see on the video. But I would recommend using a white thread since most of your project is going to be white or light colored. So now that we've got our first set of 5 beads on, I'm going to pick up another set of 5 beads. And these are the 11-ohs. And just let these fall all the way down so they sit right up against the previous set of 5 11-ohs. Push them in tight next to the cabochon and use my thread to just pull that around. And then down through the felt right at the end of those seed beads. And then on the back side here, I'm actually going to go through the same puncture mark that I made at the very beginning, because I want to go through both sets of 5 seed beads. So I'm going to go through a total of 10. And this is just backtracking. And keep that tail out of the way. So here I'm going to pick up some more beads. So I'm going to pick up another 5. And again, let those fall down next to the previous set of beads. Use my thread to pull them around the cabochon and then go down through the felt at the very end of those beads. On the back side here, I'm going to count back 1, 2 puncture marks here, and I'm going to go through that second one so that I am backtracking again. So now as I go forward through the project, I'm going through 2 sets of 5 seed beads. And by backtracking, that helps to pull everything tight together so that you don't have these sections kind of looking separate with 5 beads, a little gap, and 5 beads, and a little gap. So by backtracking and pulling that thread through all those beads again, it just helps pull everything tighter. So I'm going to continue like this, picking up 5 beads, or any really number of beads that you're comfortable with. I would recommend between 4 and 6, and that'll just be a nice number there for you to work with. And you're going to continue here, going around, adding these beads, snug up against the cabochon, and backtracking. Now at the end, you may need more than 5 or less than 5 because it's not a guarantee that you're going to have exactly an even number of seed beads going around here, or a number that's exactly divisible by the number of beads you're picking up. So you're just going to pick up however many beads you need to fill that gap. I'm going to go ahead, continue here, and finish making this little circle around my beads, and then we'll start talking about adding the leaves and some of the other components. I've now finished adding a row of seed beads directly around my cabochon. I'm going to take my needle and thread and just run through all of these beads to pull them all close together. There's a tendency for there to be gaps between the sets of seed beads that you add. So by taking your needle and thread through all those beads, you'll actually close up those gaps and pull all the beads tighter. That's also the reason for doing the backtracking with the stitch as you're adding the seed beads. But I also like to do this as a final step and go through all the beads together and cinch them together and pull them tight. So that should help close up any little gaps where you had seams in between your sets of beads. Now, once you have those beads on, we're going to start talking about adding our leaves. I like to put the row of seed beads on around my cabochon first so that I can take these leaves and I can put them right up against those seed beads so I don't have to guess how much room I need for them. If I put the cabochon and my 2 leaves on first, then I have to kind of guess how much room I need for my seed beads here. And I don't want to do that. I want to know exactly. I don't want to guess. So I put that row of seed beads around first. I'm going to make sure my needle and thread are coming out towards the bottom of my cabochon, just so I'm closer to where I'm going to be working. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread and go through the felt so that my needle and thread are on the back side of the felt. Now I'm going to put my leaves on. Now these leaves that I have, they already have kind of a rough surface to them, not as smooth as the cabochon, so you don't have to rough them up as much. They also have a hole through them, so I'll use the hole to also sew them on. So by gluing them, it's just going to hold them temporarily while I'm sewing them on, so to make it easier for me to keep them in place as I sew through them. And I'm going to center them. Again, if you are using this little piece here that we've cut of the felt, that is the size that you need, the size and shape. You're going to center your leaf so that it's in the center of that shape. And the extra felt going all around the edges of the leaf is uniform all the way around. And the ends here of the leaf here at the base, you're just going to push those right up against the seed beads around your cabochon. If you have a square piece, if you're not using this little pre-cut piece, you can still do the same thing here. You're just going to put them down at an angle, and you can also change them a little bit if you want to have them a little bit different. But I like this shape because we're going to put a tassel here, and it frames that tassel very well. So I'm going to let this dry for a minute, and then I'm going to reinforce this by just taking my needle and thread through the holes of the beads here. But first I'm going to let this dry so that as I work with it, it doesn't get squished around, it doesn't go out of place. My glue has dried a bit now, so I should be able to touch these without moving them too much. Since these beads do have holes through them, they're not cabochons, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that. I'm going to take my needle and thread and come up through the felt right next to the hole in my leaf bead. Oops. Taking my glue along with it, and take your needle and thread through the hole in the bead and then down through the other side. And I'm going to do this twice just to make sure that, just because I like to always reinforce things and two pieces of thread running through is always better than one when your thread is holding everything in place. And I'm going to go through, now to get to the other leaf here, I'm actually going to go through some of these seed beads. So if I come up here through my felt at the beginning of this other leaf at the base here, I'll travel through some of the seed beads to hide my thread. And then I'll go down through the base or through the felt at the base of that, my other leaf here. And I'll come up at the tip or the end of the leaf and go through that hole. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You just want to make sure that you're getting everything connected and adhered well to your felt. And the reason why I didn't go from the tip of this leaf here to the tip of this leaf was because I would see the thread there, of course, and I don't want to see any thread. I don't want any thread to come out beyond the edge of my felt. So if you're working on a piece of, if you're working on a square piece, you just want to keep that in mind. You want to keep all of your thread paths and all your thread stitches underneath, or you want it to be kind of like a mirror image of what you're working on the front, so that when you cut this piece off eventually to create the shape, then you would be cutting your thread on the back as well. And you want to, of course, avoid that. So you want to keep your thread stitches under the beads as much as possible. So now I've gone through my bead, my leaf bead a couple times, and that is now on there very well. So I can start outlining this leaf just like I did the cabochon with some seed beads. I'm going to start here in the corner, right in the corner here between my leaf and my seed beads around the cabochon. I'm going to start by picking up some of this yellow color seed bead that I have. I like this yellow because it is going to be very springy and play off the gold there in that leaf. I'm picking up 4 seed beads. You can pick up more or less if you want, but I'm picking up 4 here. It just seems like the right number to kind of go around this curve. I'm going to go through my felt and backtrack. So I go through all these 4 beads again, and I'm going to continue around the leaf just like I did with the cabochon, continuing to add a series of beads and then backtracking. So here one more time, I'm going to pick up some beads. And again, 4 just seemed like the right number here to get where I needed to be. And I'm going to go down through the felt and then come at the back, come up through the back and through now all beads here, which will be those 8 beads. The more beads you pick up at a time, the less likely that you're going to see any sort of seams or gaps, because you'll have less of those seams or gaps. But you also don't want to pick up so many that it becomes difficult to keep them in place. So you want to have your, those punctures here where you're holding your beads down to the felt. You want to have that frequently enough that it is keeping all your beads down and they're not kind of flopping around. On the edge here, or on the tip on the end, I'm going to do just a couple beads because I want to have my beads held down to the felt at the base of that bead or at the tip of that bead. So if you have a sharp change in direction or a corner around your bead, it's nice to always sort of anchor your beads to the felt right there. So I'll punch through the felt there, and then I'll pick up some more beads here to go around the edge. Any place where you have those sharp corners, that's a good place to have those little anchor points, because if you do have a gap, it'll fit naturally there instead of having a string of beads that comes around and could potentially kind of flop up on you. So go ahead and continue around the leaf here, and then we're going to move on into the other leaf in the same way before we move on to embellishing even further. Now that I have my leaves outlined, I'm going to add another row of seed beads on the outside of this first row of seed beads that I added around my cabochon. I'm going to do this just following the same steps, the same stitches, but I'm going to switch up the colors a little bit so that I'm alternating them and creating a little bit of an ombre or just a little bit more interest here in the pattern. So I'm going from something very, very solid in the center here, and then adding, you can see here, adding the pink and this cream color alternating, leading out to the cream on the very edge when I do this edging here. So following the same exact stitch here, and just picking them up in an alternating pattern. Two rows of 11-ohs, if you are using this little pre-cut piece of felt, should get you right about to the edge. Now something that you can also do is you can add a picot trim or something to this, so you can actually embellish this a lot more. I wanted to keep it a little bit simple just for this video, but you can definitely do something to make the center a little bit fuller. You can also do more of a bezel around this cabochon if you'd like, and do a peyote stitch building off of this base and then ending with some 15-ohs. That'll overlap the cabochon a little bit so you won't see as much, but you can also get some more interest, some more texture, some more color in there by doing something like that. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row of seed beads, and then we will move on to the tassel. So you can see here that I finished adding the 11-oh seed beads around my cabochon and my leaf beads. So I'm going to put this little piece aside for right now. When you're doing these at home, if you want to go ahead and do the backing and this edging before you move on to the tassel, you can. You can really do this in any order because they're going to be done a little bit separately, or they both have to be done, and then we'll connect them. So you can really do this in any order, but first I'm going to do the tassel, and then I'll do the backing and attach it. So this piece here that I have, I'm going to set aside because I don't need it right now. I'm going to move on to making this separate piece, the tassel. And for this, I'm going to use a 4mm bead. You can use any sort of 4mm bead. I happen to have a pearl here, and you want something in the color of your seed bead so that you don't see it through your seed beads. Or if you do see any through your seed beads, it's the same color, so you don't have any anything like red or anything bright under there. You just want it to blend. So I'm going to pick up this 4mm bead, and again, this is just a little Potomac pearl that I have. And I'm going to hold the end of my thread just with my fingers here so that the thread doesn't go all the way through the bead. Pick up 5 of my 11-oh seed beads in whichever color I want the tassel to be. So for me, it's going to be this cream color. And then I'm going to go back through the pearl so that my 5 seed beads are just added to the outside of the bead here. And I'm going to do this another 4 or 5 times here to add a series of 5 beads, looping around the outside of my 4mm bead. So here's my third set, and you can see it's starting to fill in around my bead here. I'm going to do one more set. I'm going to do one more set of 5. This will be my 4th set of 5. And as I do this, I want to make sure that they're not overlapping on each other. I just want to make sure that they're sitting next to each other. Actually, I'm going to add one more here because you can see I've got plenty of room to add one more. So I'm going to do 5 sets of 5 seed beads, just wrapping around the outside of my 4mm bead. And holding that tail thread because I really haven't anchored it in any way. So I've just been kind of holding on to that tail thread. So now that you've got those sets of 5 seed beads, we're going to fill in the gaps in between the 5 seed beads with a set of 3 seed beads. So you can kind of hold 2 of those sets of 5 seed beads apart, pick up a few seed beads, go back through your purl, and let those 3 seed beads fall in between the sets of 5, and then we can move on and add 3 seed beads in between another pair from our round of 5 seed beads. So just add those 3 seed beads so that they sit against the purl in between 2 sets of 5. It can be a little bit tricky because you're working in a small space. You just want to make sure your thread is sitting where you want it to be, and those sets of 3 will center themselves on the purl so they kind of sit at the equator of the purl. And go around here and just add these 3 seed beads as you need to fill in any gaps between the sets of 5. You don't have to add them between every set of 5 if you feel like it's getting full and you just don't have any room for them. Don't worry about it. You don't have to do every other one. This part here isn't an exact science. We are just filling in any gaps. I'll add some here. I think I've got a little room here. And make sure those are centered as I pull them tight. Okay. And then once you're done, you should have your seed beads covering your 4mm bead with very little or no gaps. So you shouldn't really see that 4mm bead underneath, except for at the very top and bottom. Now remember, I'm also using this green thread just so that you can see it better in the video. I would be using a crystal or a white thread like I did in the sample here. So I'm also seeing some of that green coming through, but it'll look much nicer if you use a color of thread that blends in with your seed beads. So now that I have this part done and I have my little 4mm bead covered, I'm going to add some fringe here to create this tassel. I'm going to take my needle and thread and go through one of the seed beads that's sitting directly next to the hole of my 4mm bead. And then I'm going to pick up a series of 11-ohs. And for me, that's going to be 20. That's the length that I'm going to use. And you can make this little tassel however long or short you want. 20 is going to be the number that I'm going to use, and that'll match what I have here. So you could start with 20 and get a visual and see if that's something that you like, if you want to make it shorter or longer. So here's my 20 seed beads. And now I'm going to take my needle and thread and go through all of these seed beads except for the last one. So I'm just going to skip this very last one and go up through the rest of the beads. And as you pull, this final seed bead here will kind of sit offset from the others, and it'll hold your thread so that your thread doesn't go through all those seed beads and undo all the work that you just did. Once I get through all the seed beads, those 19 other seed beads that I added for the fringe, I'm going to go through the next seed bead. And you can just kind of pick one here. I'm going to go in one direction. I'm going to go through the seed bead that I'm coming out of at the top here. I'm going to go through that seed bead again just to center my little tassel on that 11-0. And then I'm going to go through the next 11-0 seed bead that's sitting right up against the hole in my 4mm bead. And I'm going to keep adding fringe in this way. You should have a total of 5 pieces of fringe because I'm going through the 11-0 seed beads that were in the sets of 5 that I picked up when I ran around my 4mm bead. So I should have 5 11-0 seed beads that are sitting right next to the hole in my 4mm bead. And so I'm going to have 5 pieces of fringe, and then I'm going to come back around and make it a little bit fuller. So continue around, and once we get this first set of fringe done, I'll show you how to make it a little bit fuller by adding some more. Once you're done with your 5 initial pieces of fringe, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. It's a little bit loose and it's not quite as tight and put together as this one that I have here. So we're going to make that, we're going to fix that. We're going to make that a little bit tighter here. My thread right now is coming out of one of the 11-0s here at the base of my pearl. That was part of one of these 5 sets of 5 that I took around the pearl. And I'm going to go down through the first 2 seed beads in that piece of fringe directly attached to it. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread and go up through 2 seed beads, the first 2 seed beads, in the piece of fringe directly next to the fringe that I just came out of. And then I'm going to backtrack here and go down through the 2 beads on the previous set of fringe. And then up through the 2 beads on that second pair of fringe, or second piece of fringe. So this is just a little ladder stitch that I'm doing with the first 2 seed beads in the fringe. So coming out of this piece of fringe here, I'm going to go down through the 2 seed beads, first 2 seed beads in the pair of fringe directly next to it. And then I'm going to go up through the first 2 seed beads and down again through those next 2 seed beads. And that's my second little bit of ladder stitch. I'm coming out the bottom here of these 2 seed beads. So now I'm going to move on to the next piece of fringe. This is the 3rd piece, and up through 2 beads and down through 2 beads. And then up through 2 beads. And then onto the next piece of fringe here. Down through 2 beads at the top, and up through 2 beads, and then down through those 2 beads. So now I've got all of them connected, except for here where there's a gap where I have to connect the first and last piece of fringe. And I will do that the same way by just going up through 2 and then down through 2. And up through 2 here. And now at this point I'm going to go down through 2. And I am done with this little ladder stitch. So this ladder stitch, I'm not actually picking up any beads. I'm simply doing a little up, down through 2 beads, through the 2 beads at the very top of each little piece of fringe. And that will pull them all together. It will cinch them together nicely so that they are sitting very bunched at the base of this little ball that I created, instead of kind of flopping and being a little too full so it loses any kind of shape. So coming out of the 2 beads that I was using for that ladder stitch, I'm going to actually add more pieces of fringe here to make this fuller. Because I'm already coming out through 2, I'm going to actually only pick up 17 additional 11-0s. you may be saying 17, that only gets you 19 and you have 20. I like having it offset a little bit. You can play around with it and see what looks good to you, but I liked having my second pair of fringe just one bead shorter. It just made it look a little nicer in my opinion. But you can play around with that and you can really do anything you want as far as the look of the fringe. You can make it shorter so you've got two sort of tiers of fringe going on, and that would look really nice too. So I have 5 here. There's 10. And there's my 17. And just like I did the first time, I'm going to just skip this first seed bead and go up through the other 16 seed beads. I'm going to go through the 16, and then I also want to go up through the very 2, or the 2 at the very top that were part of that ladder stitch. Oops. And be careful not to get your thread tangled, because it's very easy to get it caught on all the little pieces of fringe that you have. And I'm going to just go down through the next 2 set of seed beads here that were part of that ladder stitch and add an additional piece of fringe with 17 11/0s on this. So I'm going to follow the ladder stitch pattern and just go up and down through those 2 sets of beads at the top of my fringe, adding a second pair of fringe to every set of 2 seed beads that I have here. So go ahead around and add those 5 additional pieces of fringe. I have 1, so I'll need to add 4 more here. And then we'll work on attaching this and finishing the back of this earring. So now you should have these 2 pieces. You've got your tassel, which is partly done except for attaching it to your earring. And you've got this piece here, which will need the back added to it first. This is like a thicker faux leather, and I like it because it's a little bit more substantial, but it's still very easy to take your needle and thread through. So I've just cut a kind of a wonky square here, but I've cut myself a square that will be just a little bit bigger than the piece that I need it to fit. I'm going to take my glue here, and you can see I've already tested this out. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue here on the back. I don't need a ton, but just enough to cover that and get that just so it can adhere. You can let it dry for a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and just start cutting this back so that it fits and it's the same size as the felt. You can use any kind of scissors that are going to work that are sharp enough. I have some little slip-in snips here, and these will work. The edge of these, or the very tip, fits in the little corners very well. It fits very nicely if you have corners on your piece like I do here. So I'm just going around here, giving a little snip as I go and taking care of those corners. And you can see it cuts very easily, but it gives you a nice little faux leather look. You can also trim down your felt. So if you're using a piece of felt like the pre-cut ones that we're giving you in the kit, you'll of course be able to leave that the way it is. You can also trim it if you have a little too much showing. And then of course, if you are using just a piece that you've cut out a little square, you'll want to trim that down. And then of course, add this backing first. You're never really going to get it all in the first cut. So just go in here and trim as you need to until you've got it the same on the back and the front. And as you need to trim so that you don't have a lot of excess. If your edges aren't completely perfect, that's fine, because you'll see that when we add the 8/0 seed beads around the edge, it'll actually take care of some of that. You won't see some of the minor little dents or fraying, but you want to make sure that the back and the front are the same shape. So there it is. I'm going to let that dry for a minute before I start manhandling it more. And then I will start working on a brick stitch around the outside. Once you're ready to start adding the edge, you're going to use some 8/0 seed beads. I like the 8/0s because the 8/0s are just thick enough that they're going to cover the edge here really well. You can see this is a little bit thicker than 11/0 here. So the 8/0 is actually going to just cover that edge and make that really nice and cinch everything together. So I accidentally cut my thread when I was trimming the edges of this. So if you do the same thing that I did, all we're going to do is take our needle and thread and find a nice place we want to start, go through the felts from the bottom to the top or from the inside to the outside here. Leave a little bit of a thread tail and go back through the felts. And that will essentially act like a stop bead, but it's like a stop stitch. So you're just anchoring your thread there so you can give it a pull and not have to worry about your thread tail coming out. Now remember that I'm using the green thread just so that you can see this in the video. Normally I would be using white since I have a white felt that I'm working on, and then you won't see the stitches as much. You'll see the stitches in this, like I said, because I'm using the green thread. I'm going to pick up 2 of my 8/0s and working along the edge here, I'm going to go through the back of my piece here, and I'm going to move over to the right about the space of 2 8/0s and go through the felt or through the backing and the felt. And you'll see these 2 beads kind of want to sit at a diagonal. I'm going to take that needle and thread and go through the second bead here from the very outside hole to the inside hole here and pull up so that as I pull my thread up, it'll actually situate that bead so that it's now sitting with the hole upright facing outward. I'm going to take my needle and go down through the first bead and go through the felt or through the backing here and the felt. And then up through that bead from the very outside to the inside hole so that when I pull that and pull that tight, I'll now have both of my beads sitting next to each other, just like that, with the holes sort of radiating out from the center of the project here. So instead of sitting next to each other like this, I've got my holes sitting upright so I can see the holes along the edge. Once you have those first 2 beads on, we're just going to continue with a brick stitch coming out the top of this 8/0. I'm going to pick up 1 8/0, and I like to start on the back here, and I'm going to puncture. I'm going to move over about the space of 1 8/0, and you'll get used to the spacing the more you do this. Puncture through that backing and the felt. Go through the 8/0 from the bottom to the top so that as you pull, the hole is now situated facing up. And we're going to repeat this step all the way around until we get back to the front. So we're going to pick up 1 8/0 and along the back here, move over about the space of 1 8/0, puncture through both my backing and the felt, come to the front here, go through my 8/0 from the bottom to the top, so I'm coming out through the top of that hole, and then move on to pick up another 8/0. I'm going to go all the way around here. And then when I get back to the beginning, I'll attach my last 8-0 to my first 8-0 here. And then I'll be ready to attach my tassel. I want to show you how to add a post earring to this, like the one I have here, if you're interested in making these into post earrings. If you want to do a fish hook, all you have to do is add a little loop of seed beads or a wire guard at the top here, and then, or a jump ring if you want, and attach the fish hook earring. But if you want to do a post like what I have here, we're going to actually do that before we seam up all the edge. So you can do this either now while you're working on the seam, or you can do this before you even start working on the seam. It's going to be the same process. You're going to make sure that your back piece here is centered on the front. And then you're going to use your post earring here to kind of decide, use the pointed part here, the post part, not the top. And we're going to decide where you want that. You can, if you want to, use something like a little reamer to make a little dot to kind of get an idea of where you want that. And then that way you're not actually making a puncture, you're just getting an idea, a visual of where it will be before you actually poke a hole. You want the hole to be low enough so that when the post or the pad of your post is centered on it, the pad doesn't come out beyond the edge of your earring piece. And if you're doing a pair of earrings, which I'm sure you're going to be doing a pair, not just one, you want to make sure that the post on both is in the same location. So I would recommend doing these at the same time, not one and then the other. If you have that hole where you want it, go ahead and use your post to push through the backing here. And then we're going to take our post earring and we're going to put it on the inside and go through that hole from the outside, or from the inside to the outside, so that the post is actually sitting inside between the two layers of our embroidery. So at this point, I would test this on your ear and make sure that enough of the post is sticking out so that you can put it through your ear and attach the back. Because putting it through this thick back, you will actually lose some of the length of the post. So if this is not going to work for you, and it's not going to leave enough of the post to then be able to put the back on your earring and have it sit comfortably, you want to consider something like the fish hook instead of the post earring. But I'm going to go ahead and finish these with the post so you can see what that looks like. And you can see I was able to do that really without disrupting any of the edging. And like I said, you can do that first before you even start the edging. But sometimes I like to wait till I have some of the edging done, just so that I get this centered exactly where I need it. If I do this before I start the edging, there's always a chance that despite my best efforts, the back may migrate a little bit and be off center a little bit, and I may have to trim it. So if I do it at this point here, where most of it is kind of set and I know it's not moving any place, then I'm guaranteed to get it exactly where I want it. I'm going to go ahead here and continue going around until I get to back to where I started. I've now finished adding the last 8-0, and all I need to do now is connect it to the first 8-0. So I'm going to come out through the top of that 8-0 and go down through the top of the first 8-0 to have that thread connect the two of them. And I'm just going to treat this first 8-0 like it's a new one, and I'm going to follow the same pattern here and go through my felt and the backing and up, and then I'll backtrack here and I'll go through the last bead. So I'm just going back and forth through the first and the last bead to just reinforce that end connection there and make sure that there's no gap sitting between the two. And out through the top. And now at this point, I can take my needle and thread and bring it through my project a little bit, through my 8-0, through some of the felt, and I can bring it up between some of the 11-0 beads that are part of my project and tie off this thread. Just taking my thread through some of my 11-0s and making a little overhand knot over the existing thread sitting between those beads. I'm going to cut or thread burn this thread off here and make a nice little knot there with the thread burner. So that piece is done. And if you have any other thread ends, of course, we'll want to take care of those as well. Okay. So now I'm at the point where I am ready to attach my tassel. I took my thread, or I took my needle off of this. I'm going to go ahead and attach my needle again. Squish that end there and get my needle on. I have enough thread here to work with, so I'm just going to work with the existing thread. If you don't, you'll want to just cut yourself a new piece and pick a bead on here to be your stop bead and anchor that bead or anchor that thread on there. My thread is now, my thread that I threaded onto my needle is a thread that's coming out of the fringe. So it's the piece that I was working with, and I just removed the needle and put it back on. Of course, if you have more than one needle, you can also just leave your needles on there and you don't have to worry about that. Take your thread and needle through the 4mm bead. So you're going to go through the hole at the center of that bead up through the top. And now you're going to pick up a few beads. You can see here I have 3 beads that I've picked up, and I'm going to use my 11-0s here. So I'm going back to the 11-0 seed beads and let those 3 beads fall down. And I'm going to choose exactly where I want to attach this to my piece. You want to add it in the center here. And when you've done the border, you probably have 2 seed beads, 2 8-0 seed beads that are sitting right in the corner here. If you've got them sitting so that you've got one on the right and one on the left, we'll go through both of those. If you have them sitting so that you've got just 1 seed bead here in the center, then you can just go through that one 8-0 at the center. There's really no right or wrong. You just want to make sure that you're attaching this, so attaching this tassel so that it's centered between the leaves here. Since I have a seed bead here on the right and the left, I'm going to go through one of these beads, and I'm actually going to go to the back here. I'm going to go through one of the beads first, the bead on the right or the left, it doesn't really matter. And then down through the bead on the other side. So I'll have that bridge thread stretching between those 2 8-0s. And down through the 3 seed beads that I used, that I picked up at the top of the 4mm bead. And I'll go down through that 4mm bead. And give that a pull there. I'm going to use one or two of my 11-0s here and go through, I'm actually going to go through 2 that I used in that ladder stitch and go through the 2 beads in the ladder stitch because I just need something to anchor my thread. So depending on where your thread needle came out once you went through that 4mm bead, you're just going to wrap around 1 or 2 beads to just hold your thread there so that as you pass through the 4mm bead again, you're not undoing the work that you just did. You essentially just need a little stop bead. And as you go through the 4mm bead again, you want to go through the 4mm and through the 3 beads at the top. So through my 4mm and through, oops, and making sure you don't get tangled there, and through the 3 beads at the top. And I'm going to repeat the step that I just did to attach to the 8/0s. So I'm going to go through 1 8/0 and then cross over the next 8/0, keeping myself untangled, and through my 3 seed beads at the top of that 4mm. Once I come out the 3 seed beads here, and my thread is coming out between the 3 seed beads and my 4mm round, I should be able to take both of my tail threads here, or both ends of my thread, and make a couple little knots, and then burn that down. Make sure that it's nice and tight, and take your thread ends, cut them off, and burn them down. So you want to make sure now that everything looks the way that you want it to be. And there you go. There's my completed pair of earrings. You might be able to tell through this video here, this is the earring that I did with the white thread, and this is the earring I did with the green thread. I can tell very clearly that there's a difference, not just on the edge here where I see the thread, but also running through my seed beads here. Through this ivory Ceylon color, because it's a little bit transparent, not very, but just a little bit. And of course I can also see a difference where I'm actually seeing that thread exposed. So you just want to make sure you're using the same color of thread and not do what I did. But of course I did that just so you could see that thread. And that's just a little comparison for you in case you're curious how much of a difference your thread color makes. To me, it makes quite a bit because in person here, I can see quite a bit of a difference between these two. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below and let us know your thoughts. You can also subscribe to our channel to be notified as soon as we have more beading tutorials out that you will enjoy probably just as much as you enjoyed this one.